Matthew 5, the last section is about loving your enemies. Now, we had talked a little bit about this yesterday. I think we just talked about 43 and 44. Is that correct? So just to reiterate, Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." That was the Pharisaical interpretation, which was contrary to what God has said in the Old Testament. "But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." And then verse 45, he goes on to give us a reason for that, the purpose of the principle, as it says in your outline, in order or so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. Now, what he means by that is not that you become sons of the Father, that by praying for your enemies, then you become children of God, you become saved. What he's saying is that you'll be, in other words, it'll be evident. It will be something that others will see, that you are sons of your Father. You'll be considered sons of the Father. Okay, is that clear? Any more explanation you need on that? That if you pray for your enemies, for those who persecute you, then you will be considered, or people will see that you are sons of your Father who's in heaven. And then it gives an example of God. So if we're sons of the Father, that means we act like the Father. And so Jesus tells us how the Father is, how he acts. "For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust." You understand what he's saying there? God doesn't discriminate when he puts out the sun and the rain. He gives it to everybody. And so we are to have that same love for all people too, even if they're our enemies, even if they're evil. We still should be concerned about them. Any question about that so far through verse 45? The name for that is God's common grace. Common grace means he is gracious to everyone in some ways. And sending sunshine and the rain is part of his common grace. Okay, and that's the rationale behind the principle. Then we go to the implications of the principle, verses 46 to 47. "For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same?" So what's he saying here? When he's talking about the tax collectors, he's using them as an example in the same way that most people thought of tax collectors. And that is, they're the lowest of the low. They're really awful people. Now, he's not making that value judgment, but he's just saying that's how people think of tax collectors. For us, we might say, you love those who love you. Even members of the mafia do that, right? Even members of a gang do that. So, how does that make you any better than them? Then verse 47, "If you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even Gentiles." And from a Jewish perspective, that would be, all those who are outside of God. Even Gentiles do that. Greet those that are their brothers. All right, so do you understand the illustration that he's giving here? The example, the implication of the principle is that if you just love those that love you, and do good only for those that are your brothers, then you're not doing any better than the worst people around. All right, any questions so far up through verse 47? Now, verse 48 could be problematic for us. "You therefore," so as a result of all what he said, "you therefore must be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect." All right, so what does that mean? You must be perfect. So we've got to live sinless lives. That's what God expects of us.
Well, we can't live sinless lives because we're human, but we must strive to be like God.
Yeah, that's the goal. The goal is that we do live a life that is reflective of who God is. Right. So It's not, we can't say, well, you know, I sin, I'm a sinner, so that's an excuse. Well, it is kind of, but in other ways, we ought not to be satisfied with that, right? And in reality, another way of looking at this is this word that's translated perfect here could be thought of as the word complete. And so it may be that Jesus is saying this, don't compartmentalize your lives and say, oh, I'm going to love these people and hate those people. But your life should be a completeness, should have completeness, that people can't say, well, you pick and choose who you love and who you don't love, and you're nice to some people, you're not nice to other people. Have you ever known somebody like that? Nice to some people, not nice to other people? Yeah, maybe some of you are like that, I don't know. But Jesus is saying, don't be that way. Be a complete person. Just like your Father is complete. You know, He sends sun and rain on everybody. Any questions? All right, let's go on to chapter 6 then, which has to do with, the first part has to do with giving. Now remember, this is still all part of the Sermon on the Mount. So this is a somewhat lengthy sermon as you look at it, you might think. All right, so in verse 1 he says, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people. And as we got, oh wait a minute, before we do that, oh, I forgot. There is a chart. I wanted to make sure we do that before we go on. There's a chart which is, I redid the question numbers last night because some of them were out of whack. And then after I had got them all done, I looked and found one that I forgot to change. So I don't know how that'll work out. But anyway, I think it's question number 245 now in your chart, which is this chart. And it's like the one we started before, and I realized last night that I had basically had this chart in two different places. So we didn't really talk too much about that previous chart. So, and then if you do have anything for there, you can probably use it for this, especially since you're writing it on paper. You don't need to erase that one or whatever. So, but just look at the chart on, which is number 245, and we have, and I changed it now to the Pharisaical interpretation of the law. I think it says that, doesn't it? You see that? And then Jesus' interpretation, and then application, right? Okay, so let's go down through. How many of you already have all those filled in for the Pharisaical interpretation? Okay, so some of you were diligently doing that as we went along. That's good. Good job. The rest of you, let's catch up and do that. I guess we'll help you along here just for time's sake. So the first, okay, I got to go to mine here. The first Pharisaical interpretation of the law was what? Morgan?
Don't murder?
Yes, don't murder. Now, what was Jesus' interpretation? Kayla?
I started on a different page. I have to go back and find it.
So while you're looking, we'll go to Jordan.
Don't get angry.
Right, don't be angry or don't hate. The hateful anger is murder. All of you should have had that already, I think. And then application. When you look at what he says to do about that, how does Jesus apply? Now you may have put something for yourself, but first let's see what Jesus said in application. For example, what does he say about worship in application? Brenna?
Before you go to the altar, you have to reconcile with the brother.
Yeah, so before you can think about worshiping God, you need to make sure that things are okay between you and someone who might have something against you. Make sure that there's nothing between you and another person. Okay, so that would be one application. You can't worship God if someone hates you. And then there was another application. I'm not sure how to approach it without just saying it. So look and see, what do you think is the next application that he brings up? Anybody see what the next one is? Okay, Brenna?
Come to terms quickly with your accuser.
Yeah, so in other words, resolve any lawsuits that anyone has against you. If anyone's taking you to court, settle it before you get there. That's all part of not having hatred between people. So now how do we make, maybe I should have put a separate category for personal application. I'll think about doing that for the next time. What about personal application here? How can we take what Jesus said by way of his application and apply it to our situations? Because none of us are standing before an altar with an animal waiting to be slaughtered. But so how can we apply that? Are you thinking? It's so hard because I just don't ever hate anybody, or nobody ever hates me. Okay, Brenna.
I mean, like after you get into an argument with someone or you have like trials between people, immediately try and reconcile that. And like if we're not like going to an altar to worship God, like sacrifices and stuff, but like we should be like reading our Bible and like we're worshiping God in our actions. So I worship by reconciling to other people who are worshiping God.
Right, and if we even think about, we usually think of worship as occurring publicly, although we know that it's every day. But if you're in a place where there's chapel or in church and, I'm singing songs of praise to God, whatever, but I remember that there's somebody that maybe has something against me, I should take care of that. Now, you may not be able to get up and walk out of church and go do that, but especially with social media available, you can text the person very easily. So we should take care of those things and not push it aside. Any other thoughts? All right, reconcile quickly. He's talking about going to court, but even aside from that, we should try to reconcile people. All right, verses 27 to 30, what is the Pharisaical interpretation there? Griff?
Not commit adultery.
Right, don't commit adultery. And what is Jesus' interpretation? They were happy with they just didn't do the physical act. What was his interpretation? Mia?
Even if you lust, you've already committed adultery.
Right, so lustful looks equals adultery. And then what is the application? What's the application Jesus gives? Remember he talks about, if your eye offends you, if your hand offends you, what's he really saying there? You can't blame it on what? You can't blame it on your physical body. You can't blame it on your body parts. That's no excuse. All right, so you can't blame it on anything because it's your own choices that you're making. Our speaker yesterday kind of hit upon some of this as well about the lusting idea. All right, verses 31 to 32. What is the Pharisaical law? What did you put for that?
What books?
31 to 32. Isn't that right?
No, we just did that.
It's 30 to 37.
30 to
Combined.
37.
33 to
33 to
37.
37.
What about 31 and 32? It's not there.
That was
That
not
was in the last one.
32.
Yeah, 27.
It was 27 to 32?
Yes.
Oh.
Combined.
That's odd. Yeah, we should have had a separate one there. Well, since you're doing it on paper, you can
Yeah.
easily make it a separate one, 31 to 32. So you might have to look back at your text again. What's in 31 and 32? What did the Pharisees say? Stephen, did you find it?
Don't marry a divorced woman.
I think that's what Jesus was saying. What did the Pharisees say?
Don't divorce.
What?
Do not let divorce happen.
I cannot hear you.
Don't let divorce happen.
That's not what the Pharisees said. What did the Pharisees say?
As long as you had a reason, like a certificate.
Yeah, as long as you wrote out a certificate, you could divorce. So divorce simply demands a certificate. Otherwise, you can do whatever you want. And for what you can divorce for whatever reason, as long as you give them a certificate, that's all it takes. Now remember that God initiated that in order to prevent people from just divorcing for whatever reason. That you actually had to write out a certificate, and so it protected the woman. But now they even abuse that. So what was Jesus' interpretation? What did he say about divorce? John?
Good.
What?
Don't marry divorced women.
Why? What does divorce create?
Sexual immortality. Or
Immorality.
immorality, sorry.
Immortality would be living forever, and it doesn't do that. It creates adultery or immorality. Yeah, divorce creates adultery. So what's the application that Jesus gives then? Maybe he doesn't actually say it here, but what's he implying? What's he saying about divorce? Let's see. Is it a good idea or is it a bad idea? I can't make up my mind. What's he saying?
Bad idea.
It's a bad idea. So don't divorce. Now, that's not carte blanche. That doesn't cover every situation. But it covers the situation that he was addressing, and that is they were doing it willy-nilly for whatever reason. There are times when there must be a separation between a husband and wife for safety reasons, and there are other things as well. All right, so don't take this further than what Jesus really intended. He's addressing the situation where they were just divorcing whatever. I saw recently that let's see, who was it? Oh, Rudy Giuliani. You know who Rudy Giuliani is? Former mayor of New York City. Now he's a personal lawyer for President Trump. If you watch the news at all, he's been mentioned in the news a lot lately. Just saw that he has just divorced his third wife. You think about President Trump, how many wives has he had? I don't even know. So, you know, in our culture today, we're doing the same thing that the Pharisees did. You just divorce for whatever reason. And people are doing that. You see it all the time in Hollywood, of course. Every time somebody's in a movie, they fall in love with somebody else, and it seems like. So Jesus is addressing that issue. Not that there is never a reason, but he's saying this whole idea of just divorcing at the drop of a hat is something that needs to not happen. All right, verses 33 to 37 then. What was the Pharisaical interpretation of the law? 33 to 37. Sam, can you give us a summary?
You shall not swear falsely.
Yeah, don't swear falsely. What does that mean? That's kind of words that we wouldn't use today. What does that mean? Swear falsely.
Like don't like take an oath and not mean it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so don't break your oath. Don't go against your oath. Don't go against what you promise. All right. Now, and I've explained to you the situation, how they would have different degrees of what they had to keep, what they didn't. What does Jesus say? What's his interpretation of that? Noah?
Don't take an oath at all.
Yeah, don't take an oath at all. Just do what? Tell the truth. Don't take an oath. Just tell the truth. And I guess that could go with the application. Always tell the truth and you don't need to take an oath. Right? All right, any questions there? All right, 38 to 42. What's the Pharisaical interpretation? Sean?
Eye for an eye.
Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. How can we summarize that instead of writing all that down? What's that really saying?
Take revenge.
Yeah, the Pharisees said, revenge is good. That's what they were saying. I want to take revenge. All right? Now, what is Jesus' interpretation? What does he say about taking revenge? Morgan?
To keep peace.
Pardon me?
Keep peace.
Keep peace? Is that what you said? Okay. And one of the things it says, don't resist an evil person, turn the other cheek, things like that. So yeah, keep peace, don't take revenge. The application, we could put, he is implying we should accept insults. He also talks about, remember, going the extra mile, things like that, so we give more than what's demanded. So instead of looking for revenge, he says we should look out for the interest of the other person. We should take whatever insults they give us and not return in kind. And if they demand something of us, we should give them even more than they demand. And I'll think of that every time my wife yells at me to clean my bathroom.
Did you clean her bathroom?
No, I haven't cleaned mine. See, the cleaning of my bathroom is kind of a spot thing. Oh, I see something, maybe I'll wipe that up. But you know, she expects me to, like, every week go and clean the whole thing. Come on. If I don't see it, it's not there. All right, next one. 43 to 48. What was the Pharisaical interpretation of the law? Haley, do you have that one?
Love your neighbor and hate. Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.
Right. Love your neighbor, hate your enemy. What was Jesus' interpretation? Zach, do you have this? Or can you find it?
Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you.
Right. Love your enemies. Pray for the persecutors. And then what does he give as the application? What's the application here? Marissa, did you see it? What would you say he's saying? Anybody? All right, Brenna?
Love all people for God loves all people.
Yeah, so follow God's example. That he gives grace to everybody, and so should we. Follow God's example. And that includes the idea of being perfect or complete like he is. All right, that presents a good little chart to summarize Jesus' interpretation of the law, or the Pharisaic law. That gives us a bird's eye view of the whole thing, and we can see the major points there. All right, now we're ready to go to the rejection of the Pharisaic practices of the law. In this part, we've been looking at what the Pharisees taught about the law. Now we're going to look at their practices. Well, how did they live their lives? And Jesus is going to have some criticism of that as well. The first one, in this whole section, rejection of the Pharisaic practices of the law, is included in Matthew 6:1 through 7:6 and Luke 6:37 to 42. The first is concerning almsgiving, which is in Matthew 6:1 to 4. Now, what is almsgiving? Use the word there, maybe you don't know. What's almsgiving? Anybody know? Nobody knows? You never heard of giving alms? Lexi? What? Yeah, it's giving to poor people, yeah. So it's, when you drop some money in the Salvation Army bucket, that's like giving alms. So if you put offering in a church and it's used, some of it may be used, or some people have benevolent offering once a month, going to those in need. So that would be almsgiving. All right. So let's look at Matthew 6, 1 through 4. He says, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. All right. So what does that mean, practicing your righteousness before men, before other people? Jordan?
Don't do good things, just have people exceed you.
Right, exactly. So I don't know if you ever seen anybody do that, I don't know if you have or not. People that do things and they're just doing it to get attention. And we have to be careful of that, don't we? Maybe you've experienced that where you're doing something and maybe you're thinking, oh, I'll wait for a different time to do this good deed because nobody's watching right now. You ever had that thought? Come on, be honest. Or maybe you're thinking the opposite. Oh, everybody's watching. I'll wait till a time when nobody's watching. That would be the better thing, wouldn't it? Or how come I never get recognition for the good things I do? That's a pharisaical attitude. We have to be careful of. That's easily creeps in. All right, so it says beware of doing it so other people see them. For then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. All right, what's he meaning there? What's he saying? What's he mean you'll have no reward from your Father in heaven? Noel, what's he mean by that?
Like, if you get praise from people, God isn't gonna reward you.
Yeah, exactly. Notice well, then he's on to explain, but yeah, he will have no reward because, and there's another place where he talks about the fact that you've already received your reward. All right, so if you do things to be noticed by people, God's not going to basically count that for you, because you're already getting a reward by what other people see. All right, does that make sense? Everybody, you probably already know that, right? All right, let's look at verse 2. Thus, okay, here's the explanation of what you're to do. When you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. What's he talking about? Sounding a trumpet. Can you imagine what was happening, what the Pharisees did, that Jesus is using these terms? What's it sound like they were doing?
They were bragging about it.
Yeah, and actually they literally blew trumpets before they kind of a procession. Okay, I'm going to be giving some money today, so I want you to go ahead of me and blow the trumpet so everybody will see me. I mean, that's really what they were doing. They were literally blowing a trumpet. Also, it could have not been that. It could have been actually the fact that the receptacles in which they put their money was something that had a narrow neck and came up, and it was wider at the top. You ever seen like at the mall? Sometimes you see these things where you put a penny in or something, and it goes around and around, and then it goes down like a funnel. But these are made out of metal. So if they have you ever? I'm trying to think. There's places where you can throw money in for if you're giving money to something. I'm trying to remember what it was where I've seen that. I guess that the Salvation Army kettle would be an example. If you put in a dollar bill, how much noise does it make? None at all. But if you put in the equivalent amount of 100 pennies, how much noise would that make? That would make a lot. And especially if it was in a funnel kind of thing where they're bouncing around off the sides of the metal and going on down. And that's probably more what he has in mind here rather than blowing trumpets. Because they would do that. They would make a lot of noise with the money, and everybody was, oh, wow, listen to all that money going down. That person must be giving a lot. And so they would get a lot of attention because that was something that was in a public place where they would give. You can imagine maybe, in your churches, they probably take an offering. You can imagine somebody, instead of putting in a check that you can't tell how much it is, getting out their wallet and, fingering through all the bills and, putting there's a big wad of bills I'm putting, so everybody can see. That would be the kind of thing. I'm sure you've never seen anybody do that, right? Have you? Oh, okay. You're agreeing you haven't seen that. Okay. But that would be the kind of the thing that the Pharisees would do to get attention, how much money they're giving. All right. He calls them hypocrites for doing that. In the synagogues, in the streets, again, walking up, there's somebody begging. And, well, I would sure like to help you, dear fellow. Here, let me get some money out here for you. Nice and loud and make sure everybody sees what you're doing. All right, that's so you can be honored by men. All right, the result of that, though, he says, truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. Here's the verse I was thinking of. That's your reward. You got your reward because you got attention by people. Don't expect anything from God. Then the proper motive, he says in verse 3, is, but when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. What do you mean, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing? What does that mean? Do my hands actually know what they're doing? What does he mean by that, Jonas?
Be secretive about it.
Yeah. So if you're secretive about it, so secretive that you're doing something with your right hand and your left hand isn't even there, isn't anywhere in proximity, then that means you're being pretty secretive. All right, so give in secret. Don't make a big display out of it. And then the result is your Father who sees in secret will repay you. And a reminder what it says in Proverbs 19:7. He who is gracious to a poor man lends to the Lord. So when you're gracious to someone, you give to somebody who needs it, the Proverbs says that's like lending money to God. So if you lend it to God, he's going to give it back, right? And so that's the principle. We give in secret, not for show. All right, any questions or comments on the giving? All right, now the next section is what we call the Lord's Prayer, verses 5 and following. And let's see, I think we're not going to have time to do much with it. Let me see if there's anything. I think there's some questions on this. Starting with 246. I was hoping to give you time to work on this. What would be a reasonable amount of questions you could do for tomorrow? Some of you can be honest with me. What looks reasonable?
None.
That's a lot.
That's not none. Did you say none?
No.
Yes.
That's not being reasonable.
This section's a lot.
I know.
It's,
It goes away to 278. That's too many.
Jeez.
But what? 20 questions? 15?
15.
no, but the whole thing.
Well,
No, they keep going.
10 questions?
Yes.
Yes, sounds good.
Let me see.
Five.
Remember where the blanks stop, or like where the blanks begin?
What number is that?
264.
So 246 to 263?
No.
No.
No? Is that too many?
Let me just do
246 to 256.
Time.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions, but there's questions that have like multiple plus.
What about the 254? Can you make that on Monday?
Today?
Yeah.
Thursday?
246 to 254. Is that a good breaking point? I don't have the right.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
All right, 246 to 254. All right, do those for tomorrow. You haven't had an assignment in quite a while, so you need to do something. You guys are going to get lazy.
Yeah.
No, we have a lot of stuff.
150 people died of COVID every single year.
You're actually studying for exams?
And then the teachers are putting in like end of the chapter tests, like.
Gotta try to get them in.
They are.
Yeah, that's always, that's why it's incumbent upon you to study every night, not wait until test time. You have to admit, you haven't had much to do in here this week.
Yeah, that's good.
Or if the kids are able to relax.
You're welcome.
Famous people Google and 150 people until that.
Like, we're not gonna.